3 major steps were taken in this country to separate those slaves. Number 1, from the time of the original 13 colonies, landowners understood that race as an identifying marker would help them keep the free labor force intact by marginalizing and separating blacks from whites. The white slaves were called indentured servants or bonded servants. Can anyone tell me what an indentured servant was? I'm going to get somebody else because I know you know your stuff. There's a hand in the back. Indentured servants. Was it you? Yes.
Yeah. Indentured servants would make a deal with somebody to send them across the sea, and in return they'd have to do labor instead of paying for it until they worked off the debt they owed.
So an indentured servant signed a contract that said that he or she would work 3 years, 5 years, 7 years. In fact, the colonies literally had laws that said no term of indenture could be longer than 20 years. There were people who signed contracts saying that they would work 20 years to pay for their passage to the New World. Were these rich people? No. These were the poorest of the poor. These were people who at home in Europe had no education, no land, no access to any of the privileges of the Europeans who, by virtue of social class, had greater opportunity to wealth than they did. Now, here was the problem. Many poor Europeans, lacking literacy, wealth, or specific training, came here and signed contracts of 3, 5, 7 years to pay off their debts at home or to pay for their passage to the New World. We know that many of these bonded or indentured servants ran away and couldn't be caught because they just looked like everybody else. Other indentured servants formed bonds with the African slaves who worked alongside them, in some cases even marrying and having children, which posed a new problem. What are you going to do with the mixed race kids? By the late 1600s, and this is only a couple of decades after the Mayflower landed at Plymouth Rock, the colonists passed laws determining that black workers, and here's the difference, would be slaves not for contracted periods, but durante vita. And this is a Latin expression, durante vita, meaning for the duration of their entire lives. Blacks could not sign contracts for 3, 5, 7, or 9 years. Blacks were slaves durante vita. Meaning, at that moment, that race became the identifying marker of socioeconomic status. And being black meant that a person belonged to the lowest power group of American society, because as slaves, what did they provide? Tell me? Free labor. Step 2. In direct opposition to the case of the Dominican Republic, America dealt with the problem of mixed-race children by creating a law that said that every baby that was born had to take the, quote-unquote, condition of its mother. So if the mother was free, the baby was born free. But since the majority of black women serving in the original colonies were Africans and were therefore slaves durante vita, their babies, whether mixed race or not, were born slaves and were therefore slaves durante vita. Step 3. The most toxic and enduring form of racial profiling, this brings us up to today, ladies and gentlemen, was the law, which was only overturned a couple of decades ago, called the one-drop rule. Who knows what it means, the one-drop rule? Yes, dear. 1 drop of black blood and you're black. Now that sounds obvious. You're like, well, duh. But let me put it to you like this. The one-drop rule said that any child who was born with so much of a drop of black blood in the previous 2 generations, for legal purposes, was black. So the child could look like Scarlett Johansson. The child could look like Gwyneth Paltrow. My mother was blonde with green eyes. She was black because she had a distant slave ancestor. And what that meant for economic purposes was that blacks, no matter how they looked, couldn't pass for white, couldn't pretend to be white, because they were legally black if their grandparents had a drop of black blood. And therefore, they were black durante vida. Believe it or not, we actually have sociological terms for this, and this may be new to most of you. But the practice of automatically assigning mixed race people to the subordinate or lower race, which is what we do in America. If you were a mixed race person in America, one of your parents is Latino and your other parent is white, you don't get to call yourself white. You got to call yourself Latino. This is called hypo descent, H-Y-P-O-D-E-S-C-E-N-T, hypo descent, moving down. The practice of automatically assigning mixed race people to the dominant or higher group, which is what was being done with those coffee, cream, honey, caramel, and milk chocolate people in the Dominican Republic, is called hyper descent. Hyper descent is not practiced in the United States. So in other words, these practices have changed over time due to economic necessity or political necessity, or just plain cultural need. If you've got too many people who are competing for something, why not just make a law, assign them to the group that gets no privileges, and then you don't have to compete anymore. And I just want to say as a nota bene, we have such an enormous influx of Latino American people, or Latino people who will within the next generation be Latino American. And I hope I'm around long enough to see whether they decide to try to hyper or hypo. There's going to be a real war between the Democratic and Republican parties to try to get these people to vote, because there are now more Latino people in this country than African American. They gave up on us. We always vote Democrat. But it'll be interesting to see how the Latino population goes along. And judging from the fact that the majority of Latinos live in even poorer neighborhoods than blacks, have less access to education, have a far lower standard of living, and far fewer students who make it to universities, I would say the decision's kind of already been made for them. But like I said, I hope I'm around long enough to see. Here's the point I want you to understand. In the beginning, whites were slaves with blacks. Slavery didn't start with racism. The idea that blacks are members of an inferior group developed as an excuse and a justification for slavery. The idea that blacks are inferior to whites began as an excuse and a justification for slavery. Okay, point 3. Why does race continue to be a critical marker of our individual identity? Well, here we go. We know slavery ended in 1865. We know that the Civil Rights Movement led to the passage of the 1964, 50 years old, the Civil Rights Act, and the 1965 Voting Rights Act. I hope you guys vote, every single one of you. People fought and died to make sure you'd have the right to vote 50 years ago. We have a black president. Racism's over. Yay! We live in a post-racial America. Hogwash. Listen, folks, the reason why we continue to use race as a marker is because, hey, race sells. People make money from the idea of race. Long ago, our founding fathers came to understand that race could be a uniting principle in the new American society. And they knew this because they had been under the control of the British Army all of their lives. They knew what it felt like to be controlled, taxed, used, misused, abused, treated as members of a lower social class. Look, all you have to do is look at the Declaration of Independence for more information about all of that. And when the War of Independence was over, they briefly considered having Thomas Jefferson include in the American Constitution a plan for the gradual freeing of all slaves. But 2 critical factors quickly changed their minds. Number 1, the South which constituted an economically important part of the Union, was going to be very upset if slaves, because slaves are a form of, if the slaves suddenly wanted to get paid. And the American government had to go along with the South in order to protect the idea of the American Union, of the United States of America. And point two, it was much easier, and this one's really important, it was much easier to unite the growing population of European immigrants. And I want you to stop and think about this for a minute. America was getting ship after ship after ship after ship of people who were coming from throughout Europe. People who spoke different languages, who practiced really different religions, who had different forms of government, many governments that were not democracies, like the United States. People who had historical animosities. Good Lord, the Italians have been fighting with the French for centuries, and now you have all these Italians coming in with all these French people. And the American founding fathers thought, oh my God, what if New York blows up because the Italians over there on 16th Street decide to go to war? Have you guys ever seen this movie? It's a Martin Scorsese movie, where the Irish are fighting with, they're like gangs, it's called The Gangs of New York. And it's about the immigrants and how they fought each other. The founding fathers said, no, we gotta figure out a way to get everybody behind the concept of the United States. So they said, wow, what if we just made it better to be white than to be Italian or French or English or German or Irish or Scottish? Even if you were a very poor white, even if you were an uneducated white, even if you were a white who had no social privileges, at least you weren't black. So, the result of that is that people who come to this country learn very quickly that power is gained by assimilating to white culture. You leave your immigrant culture behind. You stop speaking your own language. You change your name so it sounds like an American name. You don't make your cultural food anymore. You go to McDonald's for dinner. Within a generation or two, your kids know nothing. I ask students in my class, what are you? I'm Irish. Great. What does that mean? I like to get drunk. How sad is that? Have you ever been to Ireland? I went to Disneyland. This is the price we pay for becoming here. If I were an immigrant, I'd probably do it too. Why do so many people find race more important than religion, ethnicity, or level of wealth? Well, here we go. It's your turn again. I want you to take your program or a piece of paper and write the number from 1 to 17 on your page. Just write the numbers, and I'm going to tell you what to do next, 1 through 17. Here we go. Ready? I give you 20 seconds this time. Don't be rude. Got it? I'm going to read you some statements. And all you have to do is write yes or no. That's all you do. Yes or no. Ready? Okay. Number 1. Most of the students in my classes are people of my own race. Yes or no? Most of my classes are taught by people of my own race. Yes or no? Most of my classes, question 3, reflect ideas, issues, or examples that capture my personal experience on Earth. Yes or no? Question 4. I am never asked to speak for my entire race in my classes. Some white students are like, huh? If you're a black student, you know what it is when a professor says, why, Heather, what do black people think? That's what I mean. I am never asked to speak for all the people of my race. Question 5. I can disagree with others in my class without feeling outnumbered and rejected. Question 6. I can criticize our society without being seen as an outsider. Question 7. If I need to move off campus, I can rent an apartment in a location that's safe and affordable for me. Question 8. I can be pretty sure that my new neighbors will be happy to meet me. Question 9. I can go shopping without being followed or harassed. That was 9. I can go shopping without being followed or harassed. Question 10, here we go. I can turn on the news and see people of my race positively represented. Question 11. I was taught that people of my race are responsible for America's national heritage. Question 12. Members of my family are safe from people who might not like them. Question 13. If I've got a problem and I ask to speak to the manager or the person in charge, I'm pretty sure I'll be facing somebody of my race. Question 14. If a policeman pulls me over, I'm pretty sure it has nothing to do with my race. Question 15. I feel pretty safe when I'm traveling outside my home community. Question 16. If my day, my week, or even my year are going badly, I don't feel that it's because of my race. And question 17, the last question. I can find Band-Aids that match my skin. Okay, please add up your yeses and add up your no's. Get your total yeses and your total no's. Add them up. All right. How many people had between 10 and 17 yeses? All right, let's have you stand up. Wow, look around you, everyone. Of all the people standing, I see only one person of color. Okay, you may sit down. How many people had between 10 and 17 no's? Please stand up. What just happened? What just happened? You guys, interpret this phenomenon for me. Interpret this for me. Come on. You are bright young people. Tell me what you're seeing right now. I need hands. We need a discussion. Okay, down. Thank you. I think the point was clearly made. Hands. Yes, young lady in gray.
Segregated ourselves.
You're segregated yourselves? Do you think that you're responsible for any of those 17 questions? You guys are 18, 19, 20 years old. Are any of you responsible for any of those 17 questions? No. None of you are at fault for any of this. None of you made this world like this. None of you. None of you. None of you have a right to be mad at anyone in this room who is your age. None of you are responsible for where you were born or what you were given. You are not the bad guys. That's not why we do this. We don't do this to blame you. Blame me. I'm 58. I'm part of the problem. None of you are part of the problem. So now tell me, what did you just see? Yes, sir. Okay, you're taught by society, he said, to define yourself by race. I don't think I heard the word race in any one of these questions. Were there all of race? Oh, maybe I guess the policeman. Young man in the back.
Two totally different worlds.
Two totally different worlds in one room. Say it again, louder.
Two totally different worlds.
In one room. Many of you live in complete obliviousness to what the person living in the dorm room next door to you is struggling with. But once again, even the person who's struggling has to understand that your neighbor didn't cause this. None of you are responsible for this. But just from this simple exercise, you should come to understand how different this campus is, how different education is, how different the classroom is, how different the materials that you're given in the classes are, how different life is, and how much of a struggle it is for so many people on this campus. This is a microcosm of American society. Now, these questions were adapted from an article, and I would really love for all of you to look at the complete article because it includes 26 questions, and there are other versions of it that go up to 40 questions. The original article was written by a woman named Peggy McIntosh, M-C-I-N-T-O-S-H. She's a feminist scholar, and she originally wrote this about male privilege, and then she changed it. And the name of the essay is Unpacking the Invisible Knapsack, White Privilege. And she would suggest that for those of you who had your hand up for the 10 to 17 questions, yes. What she wants you to understand is that your lives are gifted in so many ways. And that your neighbors have struggles that are invisible to you, but are nonetheless incredibly real. So how does America profit from telling us we're different? Look, race at the end of the day is reduced to highly profitable media images that relentlessly promote certain ideas. The idea that people of color are more violent and more sexualized than white people. That's why Miley Cyrus rides the wrecking ball and twerks. Because she's twerking like a black woman. That's why Floyd Mayweather, the strongest man on earth, is earning $25 million for a boxing match. He fulfills the notion that black men are violent. That's why Beyonce, I'm sorry, my daughter loves her too, but that's why she puts on a blonde wig and crawls around on the beach with no clothes on, so she can be a billionaire. Hey, race sells. Racial stereotypes make us afraid of each other. When you hear news story after news story after news story about black men beating their wives and children, or seeking to steal and kill and assault white women, we are continuing to justify and excuse the racial practices that made that exercise we just did a reality. Listen, folks, we honestly believe that we're more different than alike. Our American addiction to race blinds us, in fact, to how many values we actually share. How similar our experiences really are, regardless of our skin color, and what we could potentially do to help and to heal one another. In a classroom of all white students, and believe me, in my 23 years of Eastern, I've taught a lot of classes of all white students. Let me tell you something. There can be more religious, gender, sexual orientation, socioeconomic, and cultural differences than in this room right now. But see, we haven't been trained or allowed to see it. So I'm going to end with this thought. Hey folks, we are not without power. Several weeks ago, I began a search for a graduate assistant to work in my office. And I had 30 applications, and I selected 8 people to interview. These students who came from some of the most prestigious undergraduate schools, including, the big school up the road, they had really impressive resumes, high GPAs, academic honors, memberships in many campus organizations, and hours of volunteerism. When the candidates came into my office, I asked them a really simple question. Tell me about your experience working with students of color or with students from low-income homes where neither parent has a college degree. And the office went silent. Candidate after candidate sat there, speechless, uncomfortable, and finally ashamed. Each murmured something about, well, I got to know some of those people when I was undergrad. And in 2 instances, I just turned to the kid and I said, you're not a good fit for my program, thank you for coming. And one guy who was, he had like a resume this long, he got really crazy. Went out and started calling us and hanging up the phone and sent me about 20 emails. He couldn't believe he got fired. He couldn't believe I told him I wasn't going to hire him. I got really desperate. The final candidate for the position was a young white man who had done his undergraduate studies here at EMU. When we came to the dreaded question, tell me about your experience working with students of color or students from low-income homes whose parents didn't go to college, he said, oh, okay. And he started talking about his experiences in marching band, his experiences with campus life, his work in the vision office, his roommates from the dorms, his work in the psych labs. Yeah, wasn't an issue for him. He also admitted that he himself was low income. Man, I offered him the job before he got up out of the chair. And after he left the room, I'm going to confess something that I don't confess very often. I cried. Something came from down in here. I'm going to tell you why I cried. At that moment, I was so incredibly proud to be here at EMU. I am proud because we are one of the most diverse universities in the entire United States. A full 24% of students here are students of multiple ethnicities. And the overwhelming majority of our students, black and white, came from either low-income homes or homes where neither parent has a college degree. You don't know this, but the majority of the faculty here also struggled to become professors. And that's why so many of them, if you make the effort to get to know them, are really happy to work with you. Ladies and gentlemen, students, esteemed guests, we really are not without power. No matter what your race, your background, your level of wealth, you can and you should and you must reach out and get to know somebody who doesn't look like you. Ask somebody just to meet you at Starbucks for coffee. Go to see 22 Jump Street. It's free, right? I don't know, catch up on Modern Family. You all love our Modern Family? You know, take somebody who's never watched the show and say, okay, this show's going to really make you angry the first time, but let's watch it and talk about it. Listen to each other's favorite music. There is nothing as amazing as listening to someone's music that you've never heard before and then saying, explain to me what this music means to you. And, listen to me now, teach them how to do the line dance that you do at weddings, or teach them, hey, come on guys, teach them how to twerk. Go and throw a football or basketball, or here's one you can do. Go to the Rec IM, rent a couple of paddles, and learn to play handball together. It's a hoot. You might even consider doing homework together, or maybe, I don't know, maybe just like talk. And when you make that effort, ladies and gentlemen, think of the questions that we just answered a few minutes ago. And understand, listen to me now, understand that just because people don't get you doesn't mean that they can't get you. We have a unique opportunity on the campus of Eastern Michigan University to start making the world better, to make sure that when you are my age and you're standing at a podium and you do, you know, the unpacking the invisible knapsack, everyone in the room will have 10 to 17 yeses. I know that we can create a better version of this world. And I am really looking forward to watching you guys do it. Congratulations on coming to EMU. And thank you for being so patient with me tonight. Thank you.
Wow, what a way to start off our Star Lecture Series. I just have to say that one of the purposes we have behind a series like this is to provoke questions and to complicate pre-existing ideas and to invite you to dig deeper, because many of you are at a place in your program of study where you can seek out classes that you never even thought about seeking out before, and individuals and experiences. And thank you, Heather, for bringing that on in such a powerful way. Right now, we're going to hold you for like 10 more minutes, I promise. And one of the things I want to ask you to do now, did anybody write down a question? Did anybody have a question that you wrote down? Take a moment now to just jot down your question. If you have a paper, do you have a paper? If you have your card, then hold it up and John will come around and get that. But if you haven't got a card and you have a question, just want to stand up and we can take some questions really quickly. Back there at the back. And these two young ladies, I've got to hand it to you. They've been back there plugging away, raising their hand, and they're on the floor. And so, you know, let's get those questions first. Anybody else have a question that you want to pass up really quickly? Thank you, Ilham, for helping us to do this. While we're getting the questions up, let me just remind, well, maybe not remind you, maybe tell you for the first time, maybe remind some of you, we have a coffee hour at the Honors College in Starkweather upstairs every Friday at 3. We're getting 20, 25 people who don't know each other every single week. Lots of commuter students, so if you're a commuter student, feel free to come. Henry put me on to Finnish coffee the other day. We've got it ordered. We're going to have Finnish coffee. So come ahead. Different places here around the area are donating coffee for us. It's a great chance for you to get to know somebody and to connect. John, you want to bring cards up and we'll see what we have here? Well, are you volunteering the coffee?
Yes, I'm volunteering.
All right, so we have our first question. Please explain the profitability of race.
Okay. The fact is, let me give you an example. A few years back, there was a company called FUBU, which was called For You, By You, and everybody black ran out about FUBU stuff because they were trying to show black identity. Black people really seek some ways of expressing identity, so everybody bought FUBU stuff. By the time FUBU got going, it was already purchased by a white concern, but of course no one told people. So people went on buying products that they think express identity. The way we dress speaks to our social class and our racial identity. You all know if you see a white guy walking around with his pants sagging and his baseball cap on backwards, we give him a name, which I won't repeat, which combines the fact that he's white and he's trying to look like he's black. We could not come up with that name if we didn't understand that in selling certain types of clothing, we have already created markers that are racial identifiers. Apple-bottom jeans, racial identifiers, right? So race is sold to us in pretty much everything we do. You guys are smart enough to know certain types of alcohol are supposedly drunk by certain types of people. You don't know that? When was the last time you white kids drank a malt? A what? Right? We understand. We understand that the clothing we wear, we even understand that the cars that we drive, because there's certain models of certain makes of cars that are understood to be for certain people. And you can watch advertising and see the way the cars are advertising. Cadillac, I remember a few years ago in a class, I just mentioned to some students I was thinking about buying a car, and all the black people said together, buy a Cadillac. And I said, why? And then they went, they weren't even sure why. But they had gotten the message all through their life that a mark of middle-class blackness was a Cadillac. So understand that we identify everything from the clothing we wear, the foods we eat. I hate to say it, but you know, a lot of fried chicken gets sold to black people. Mickey D's, the majority, the population that keeps Mickey D's alive is black people, and they advertise to that extent, they advertise in that direction. Right down to the alcohol we drink, the cars we drive, all of those things are marketed. May I make another very quick comment? We live in highly segregated communities. There are still too many communities in Michigan that are either all white or black. I don't know if you're aware that the national census about 8 years ago, Livonia was the whitest city in the entire United States of America. And Detroit was the second blackest city behind Gary, Indiana. And that could only be possible if somebody is pulling some strings somewhere. And we understand that there are restrictive practices that keep certain people from getting mortgages, keep people from being able to get real estate contracts. And quite frankly, there are communities that are priced as high as possible to keep certain populations from being able to live there. So it is not by coincidence that Livonia is the whitest city in the country, and 10 miles away, Detroit is the second blackest. These things are done deliberately, and let me make this comment. When a builder sets out to build a very high-end neighborhood and wants to make sure that the people who live there are white, all they do is set the price so high that number one, blacks can't get in. And then they think that there are probably white people who are willing to pay extraordinarily high prices to not have me as their next door neighbor. I'm a pretty good neighbor. My grass is beautiful. I plant flowers, and I don't play hip hop. You know. But there are people who still feel that prestige is in living in a neighborhood where they don't have to look at me. And, you know, that's the way it is. That's America. We have time for maybe one more question?
John, do we have more questions? Any other questions?
Sir,
You had a question. You want to stand up?
I know you're tired and you've been really, really patient.
I was going to ask why is there like a substantial amount of black or African Americans in like the math science?
Woo! He said, why are there so few blacks in the STEM subjects, which would be science, technology, engineering, or math? That is a really easy question to answer, because the majority of schools in which black students attend are in neighborhoods where the tax base is very low. Understand that in the United States, your community, the taxes it collects from the citizen is the funding that goes back into the schools. So you can live in West Bloomfield and have many people who have professional degrees and make a lot of money. The tax base is very high, so the schools are excellent. But you can live 2 miles down the road in the city of Detroit, and because the majority of the people have no education, have very poorly paid jobs, they don't pay as many taxes, therefore there's less money for education. The easy answer is that the majority of people of color in this country are attending schools that do not properly prepare them to be able to survive at university when they have to take math and science classes. I mean, it's hard enough for most of us to get through bio, right? But add to the fact that you had no preparation in high school, you don't have a shot in getting through what we call the STEM subjects. That's a really easy one. The answer would be, if we really wanted to be equitable, we would collect all the money in the state from all communities and divide it equally amongst all school districts. I know there'd be people very opposed to that. The way we behaved about giving health care to all Americans makes it very clear that if you don't want to insure people for their health, you're certainly not going to want to educate other people's children. That's a tragedy. It is a real loss for the United States. And I will leave you with one thought. The reason I earned a master's and a PhD, a doctoral degree at the University of Zurich in Switzerland, is because in Europe, universities are free. I'll say that a second time. In Europe, universities are free. The tax dollars that are collected from people are given back to the people in the form of free education. When I got over there and realized I didn't have to pay tuition, I said to myself, how many degrees can you give me? Show me the next degree. I got it. I'm on it. You would have had to shoot me to keep me from getting a doctorate when I was there. So understand that most of you will graduate $20,000 or $30,000 in debt. This is a scandal in the richest country on earth. I will leave you with that thought tonight. Take care, everybody.